let me introduce you to our preacher this morning. Ready? Hey, it's the long weekend, okay? What can I say? Wow. Part 5 of our series called Clash of Kings, and want to do a special welcome to our downtown location. Downtown is actually having live worship. They have their host, Daniel, who's the pastor down there, our site pastor down there, but they're streaming our message. So welcome downtown. So excited for where we're going today. And as we jump into part 5 of Clash of Kings, if you're like, listen, this is my first time and I wasn't engaging online, so I have no idea what the first 4 parts were, and you're like me, you're like, I can't handle part 2 if I haven't seen part 1. Don't worry. Today will stand alone. Every week is its own topic, and in some ways it builds, but you won't miss a thing just by jumping in today, okay? So you'll be able to jump in. It's going to be great, and we're going to jump right into that. So as we continue our series of Clash of Kings, I don't want to recap the last 4 weeks because I think it would just take too long now that we're in week 5, so you'll just have to watch that. But let me just start off by telling you a little bit of a story about my life. I think I was about 17 years old, and I remember just being so frustrated. I was thinking to myself, how in the world is this still a problem? I keep telling myself I'm done. How is this still a problem? And eventually, this is like, well over a decade ago, I grabbed a pair of scissors. This is before Wi-Fi. And I grabbed a pair of scissors and I literally cut the literal phone cable. There. Now I'm done. Now I can never see that garbage again. I'm good. I'm free. Until about a week later. A week later, I was standing in a pawn shop. Never been to a pawn shop before, only seen them in movies. I found them in the yellow pages. And I was standing there, 17 years old, with a stereo in my hands. A stereo that I had saved up for a month or two of delivering newspapers. This was maybe, as a 17-year-old, my most prized possession. And as I stood in line and waited my turn and got to the front, I was willing to take what was maybe my most prized possession and trade it in for $10. $10. So I could go buy a magazine. And it was as I stood in line in that moment where I realized, this is a problem. This isn't just a problem. In fact, this is an addiction. That somehow this thing that began years before, seeming so harmless, all of a sudden has taken over my life. How did I end up here? How did I end up in this place? And today, as we jump into our passage, Jesus is gonna clash with us on so many levels. And he's gonna clash with one of our most profound assumptions, some of the things that you hear inside and outside the church of non-Jesus people and of Jesus people. He's gonna go up against all of that today. Would you join me on this journey? Matthew chapter 5, verse 27. I'd love for you to pull out your Bible. And as you're turning to Matthew chapter 5, 27, we're jumping in. Last week I told you that Jesus has this section. We started last week with part 1, where it was like these 6 things that Jesus kind of speaks to the religious people. And he's like, hey, I know that you've heard it this way, but I'm flipping the script and I'm upgrading it, right? He's like, I didn't come to get rid of the law. He's like, I came to fulfill it. I came to upgrade it. And so Jesus is getting really serious. And he does that on this passage as well. So here's the second part in a sense. Matthew chapter 5, verse 27. He says, you have heard, speaking to his audience, you've heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery, okay? Which they had. All of them knew you shouldn't sleep with someone who's not your spouse. You shouldn't sleep with someone if you're not their spouse, right? Male, female, like this applied to all. And everyone's like, yep, we got that one. That one's hundreds of years old, Jesus, and trust me, we know. And Jesus is like, but I tell you, to which they're like, are you gonna tell us we can? Like, what's coming, right? He's like, but I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully, now let me just clarify, okay? He says woman in this passage, but you can use this for both genders because the law that he was going up against was both genders. He's giving one specific example, but he's going after both, okay? So ladies, you're in on this too, okay? You thought you were out, you thought like, oh, put the pen down. Nope, pick it back up, here we go, all right? But I tell you, anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has, ready for this? Already committed adultery with her in his heart. What? Wait. No, adultery is when you actually do it. Like some of you are like, no, I came close and we were in conversation or we were sending messages, but I never actually did. And Jesus is like, if you thought about it, you did. And it's like, no, technically it's not, unless you did. Like, it's really not, Jesus. Like, what are you talking about? Like, what's going on here? It's like Jesus just made things really severe and really intense. Like honestly, like you look back in history, certain presidents have struggled to define what counts as sexual relations. But here's one thing we can all agree on. This doesn't count. This doesn't count. And Jesus is like, don't even think about it. It's like, really? Really? It's like Jesus has created a new category, optical intercourse. I remember reading a historian who was writing that. I'm like, oh, that's an intense word. But it's like, how do we even get there? Some of you downtown, you're like, you know what's really great about having a video preacher? I've never liked it till this moment. But if I leave, he won't even know. Imagine? No, don't worry. It's going to be great. Some of you are thinking, listen, I'm with Jesus on everything so far. Like the last 4 weeks have been awesome, Mark. I'm not even sure I believe in God, but this Jesus way is awesome. The love that we've been learning about, the sacrifice we've been learning about, caring for the poor, the oppressed, but like now he's talking about sex, now he's getting in the bedroom, like, and he's bringing this archaic idea of what's right and wrong. I can't deal with this. But before you ignore this, can I just remind you the commitment we made week 1? That when we clash with Jesus, we always have 2 options. We can run, or we can draw in a little closer and try and understand what he's after. And that's what we're gonna do today. And if it helps, let me just tell you that it gets even more crazy and more ridiculous what he says, so you don't wanna miss this part. Because remember last week, it also seemed ridiculous. Jesus is like, yeah, you've heard murder's wrong, but I'm telling you that if you carry bitterness and anger in your heart, or you name call, he's like, that's murder just wrapped up in a little ball. That's where it starts. Jesus always went after the heart, remember? So let's keep going. Then Jesus says this. He's like, but even if you look, and then he says, if your right eye causes you to stumble, ready for this? Gouge it out and throw it away. What? And he continues, it's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And he continues, if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off, throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. To which you're like, I know people say we should take the Bible literally, but like, do we take this literally? Let me just put you at ease. Don't take this literally, because it wasn't literal. There was literally, like in the ancient Jewish world, in the ancient Greek world, this was a saying, right? It was a moral saying to show how serious you were. It's like, do whatever you gotta do to show your moral seriousness. Cut out anything in your life, no matter how painful it is, do it if you want to reach this end. It was a normal saying. It's like me saying, it cost me an arm and a leg, okay? And then historians years from now saying, yeah, he didn't have a right arm or a left leg, right? Like, it's like, no. It was just a saying, okay? So historians tell us, like, this was a saying. Jesus is like, take this seriously. Here's how you can summarize what Jesus is saying right now. However painful, cut out anything in your life that is getting in the way of sexual morality. Here's what Jesus is saying. However painful it is, cut out anything in your life that is getting in the way of sexual immorality. Whatever you need to do, whatever the cost is, it's worth it. And then let's just go back a little bit, because there's also something else that maybe was troubling to some of you. Some of you are like, this whole thing is troubling. It's okay, we're gonna unpack it. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Some of you were like, this got serious real quick. We just came back to the building this week. Can we just for a moment, just loosen up? It's good, it's gonna be fun, I promise. Okay, anyways, here we go, right? So this is the next part that's a little bit troubling. It is better, remember this? It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. To which it's like, whoa, hell, this got real serious. Like what is Jesus talking about? Now let me just do this, because this comes up a few times in the passage and I don't want to ignore it, so I want to speak to it, okay? There are many, all through Christian history and even today, there are many different interpretations on how we're to understand hell in the scriptures. Is it literal? Is it metaphorical? Like how long? So many questions. Here's what I just summarize it, and you are so welcome. In fact, maybe we'll do a whole series on this one day, like what happens in eternity and all that. But for now, let me just tell you the one thing that I think every theologian, no matter which persuasion they are and whatever they agree on, they will say that hell is a godless existence. That hell is a godless existence. Jesus another time says it's a place where you lose your soul. Like, what does that mean, Jesus? Like, just know, it doesn't sound good. It doesn't sound good at all. So to which all of a sudden some of you are like, well, Mark, you're being too soft on it. You just need to tell them. You just need to be honest. If you're not honest, people aren't gonna start to follow Jesus if they're not scared enough. If you don't threaten them, they won't change. To which I say, hang on a second. Show me where Jesus uses hell as a threat to lead people into relationship with him. Show me. I call this the flamethrower, gun to the head method of persuasion. I don't find it in Jesus. I see Jesus talking about hell a lot. In fact, second only to what? The kingdom, which is what we're spending our whole summer talking about. But I don't see him using it as a threat. I actually see him using it as a warning to religious people who were already in, who already knew all the rules, and yet their heart wasn't in it. And he's upgrading and he's warning those people. And so I say, so in that case, let us heed the warning that he's giving us. That here's basically what I would say Jesus is saying in this whole passage. This issue has the potential to change the trajectory of your life to a godless place. This issue has the potential to change the trajectory of your life to a godless place. Here's a summary of that statement. That seems really long. Some of you are like, do I have to write all that? Don't go too quick. No, here, I'll just summarize it for you. It's not a pastime, but a pathway. Jesus is warning us. What I'm talking about right now is not a pastime. It's not something so innocent as you think. It is a pathway. It is a pathway. It's a pathway. And Jesus is saying, whatever it takes, whatever the cost, stay off this path. Now, some of you are like, it's just entertainment. I'm just bored. It's just a pastime. It's harmless. It's just fantasy. It's just pictures on a screen. It's just human nature. It's just an appetite. It's normal. Can I just clarify really clearly that Jesus is not in this passage discouraging love. He's not discouraging sex. He's not discouraging sexuality. He's not discouraging erotic behavior. He's not saying it's wrong to have sexual desire. He is not against sexual attraction. God created sex. We actually did some. It's good. I'm with you, John. Yes. Amen. But we actually did a whole message on this, My Problem with Sex. It was in our My Problem with God series about a year ago. You can search it online if you haven't heard it. But we do a whole message on this. Here was the one of the one-liners. We had a lot of it. Here's one line from this message a year ago, okay? When you read the Bible, you find a multifaceted, multi-purposed celebration of sex. God isn't against sex. He created it. I'd love for you to go back if you weren't here for that series and go back and listen to that. We just unpack that whole thing. But I just need to tell you that Jesus in this text is not condemning sexuality. He's condemning lust, and they're different. He's not condemning sexuality. He's condemning lust. What is lust? Lust is over-desire. There's desire, there's healthy desire, and then there's over-desire. Lust is an appetite that was actually good and God-given, gone out of control. What is adultery? It's an appetite out of control. The appetite within its means is marriage. Out of control, it's with anyone and everyone. It's out of control. And to be out of control, you say, well, then what does it look like to be in control? And here's one of my favorite topics to speak at weddings, because I love it when I get to do a wedding, because I get about 5 to 7 minutes to talk to the people that I'm marrying and all the congregation. Often there are people who aren't Jesus people in the room. And every time I talk about this, it makes for really interesting conversations at the reception, at the bar. I'm getting seltzer water or something, I'm sure, right? But it's always interesting. Every time I speak on this, people are like, wow, I've never thought of marriage that way. Christian people, non-Christian people. I always explain it with these 2 words. I say, if you want to understand the context of marriage, if you want to understand Jesus' view of sexuality, you have to understand these 2 words: contract and covenant. Contract and covenant. It's going to be on the screen. Contract says this: if you, then I. Okay, contract is a great thing. Some of you are contractors, some of you are in business world. You love having contracts. You have things in writing, and that's a really good thing, right? It's like, if you do this, then I will do this. If you pay me this much, I will paint this for you. If you pay me this much, I will build this for you. I will get rid of this. I will make this for you. I will paint this for you, right? If you, then I. And if you don't, then I won't. McDonald's, if you stop making the Big Mac, I won't be back, okay? It's a contractual agreement we have. I'm glad it's been going for decades. Don't ever stop, okay? That's a healthy thing to have, but that's not what marriages were meant to be. I can't tell you the number of times I sat down with couples and they explain the dynamic and what's going on and he and she, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you have a contract marriage. But that's actually not marriage. That's not marriage. Marriage is something called covenant. And some of you are like, this sounds sketchy. I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be contract. If they, then I, and if they won't, then I won't. But covenant is different. Covenant is actually a relational term, not a business term. Covenant is something that we see, maybe not in marriage, even though we should. We actually see it with children, right? Parents, you enter into a covenant when you have a child. There's no way they're ever gonna lose as much sleep as you lose for them. You don't ever have that conversation, right? There's no way that they're ever gonna make you the number of meals that you made them. They're not gonna change as many of your diapers as you, well maybe, but you know, right? Like, you gotta loosen up a bit. Right? But no parent in their right mind goes to their 10-month-old and says, seriously? It's been 10 months and I'm not getting my 10 hours of sleep back. Like, this is over. And you're allergic to lactose and gluten. And you still don't latch properly. And you take the kid down the street, he's done in 5 minutes. Seriously? You're done. I'm finding a new kid. Go find some new parents. Why? That's what we do with a contractor we didn't like. But we would never do that with a child. Why? Because we understand covenant. We understand covenant is no matter what, I will. Parents, you've lost sleep because you understand covenant. No matter what, I'll love you no matter what you do, no matter what you come home and tell me. I will always love you, son. I will always love you, daughter. Why? Because we understand covenant. Here's what you need to understand before we can ever talk about an appetite out of control. Marriage, Jesus-centered marriage, Christian marriage is always meant to be a covenant. To which some of you are like, wait, what about? I deal with some of those in that message I spoke about, so you can go through some of those. But let's just be honest. Isn't that what we all long for? Like, isn't that what we all desire? To know that someone is with us no matter what. That when we get the news that we'll never be able to have children, they're with us no matter what. When we're in the accident and we can't dress ourselves, that they're with us no matter what. That we may never be able to return the favor. That when we've lost everything, when we battle mental health, that they will be with us no matter what. We long for at the core of our being for covenant. The place we find it is in Jesus. Jesus isn't up on the cross saying, you see what I'm doing for you? Get your stuff in order, I'm coming down, I'm not finishing the job. It doesn't say that. Paul actually summarizes, he says, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. It's covenant. Christian marriage is covenant. And then get this, that means that human sexuality was designed to be in a place where sacrificial love was king. That it was all about sacrifice. And let's be honest, you know this. You know that sexuality was meant to be in a place not of taking, but of giving. We even have phrases in culture that say, oh, no, we don't want to be with them. They're a selfish lover. We know sacrifice has to be part of the equation. Why is lust wrong? Here's the bottom line. Lust is always self-focused. Lust is always self-focused. Think about this, right? Like, when was the last time you heard someone say, listen, I was feeling real generous last night, so I just took about an hour and a half to fantasize about you sexually. Yep, you're welcome. Can you imagine? We never say that. Why? Because we know it has nothing to do with them. It doesn't benefit them. If anything, it grosses them out. It is all about us. Love is always self-focused. When's the last time you heard someone say, I'm really busy at work and the kids, they got all these programs, but I'm so generous. I always find time. Even if I can only spare 20 minutes, I always find time to go on the internet and look at some pornography because I just think, gosh, someone's got to appreciate the hard work they're putting in. Someone's got to appreciate the artistry. It's the least I can do. Man, it's tiring. And man, I wish I could just go to bed, but I'm doing it for them. I'm just so sacrificial. No, it's not. Are you kidding me? Lust is always self-focused. It is always self-focused. Not only does lust not promote the Jesus way, not only does it take us outside of ourselves and serve other people, lust actually, ready for this? Lust turns us inward. Lust turns us inward. Has the reverse effect. It's not a pastime, it's a pathway. And when you engage in it, you're going to school and you're learning the opposite of the Jesus way. Remember a couple weeks ago, or last week, we talked about loving people as part of our worship? You know what lust means? It means lust kills our worship. If a life given on behalf of another is what it means to be fully alive, then lust leads to death. Because it makes it all about us. Jesus sees this thing that we see as Jesus followers and non-Jesus followers as minuscule. And he says this minuscule seeming issue has the potential to reorientate your entire life. I love C.S. Lewis in one of his books. Brilliant author, wrote this decades ago. And he was speaking specifically to men who are engaged in fantasy, sexual fantasy, and pornography. So I'm going to keep it in the context of men and women, but you'll get the drift and you'll see that it applies to both genders. But he wrote it to men. And he wrote about this topic, and he called this idea of lust, he called the people that you're engaging with imaginary women. He says, this is what we learn about imaginary women. They're always available, always accessible, always subservient. They never ask for sacrifice. They never ask to be served. They never ask for any change. And I love this language. He says, among these shadow brides, he is always adored, always the perfect lover, and no demand is ever made on his selfishness. I love that. It's powerful. So what's he saying? He's saying lusts, whether it's pornography or fantasy or any other medium that it takes, always turns us inwards. It doesn't sharpen us. It doesn't challenge us. It doesn't lead us to live a more Jesus-centered, self-sacrificing life. It makes it all about us. And that means if you have been engaging in this series and you're like, I love this idea of kingdom. I love this idea of bringing this new way where love is king. Like, I love this idea, and I'm trying to learn to be sacrificial, all this stuff. If you are in, and yet you're letting lust go unchecked in your personal life, you're undoing the Jesus way in your soul. That you're sending yourself to school and you are learning the opposite of your Jesus training. In fact, this isn't just a Jesus principle. Science is now catching up with this. You can read the New England Journal of Medicine or the Journal of Neuroscience. Some of you are like, listen, anything with journal, I don't read. That just sounds too intense for me. Okay, just Google TED Talk porn. Careful how you type that, okay? But just TED Talk porn. You will be blown away by how many TED Talks have been given on this fact of what pornography is doing to our brains and doing to our society. Here's some of the many discoveries that they're realizing. Number one, I'm gonna give you 4 things, but there's more. Number one, here's what happens when you engage in this. You start to learn that a real body isn't good enough. A real body isn't good enough. There's researchers in San Diego and now all over the world that are researching this and discovering that people who are engaging in fantasy and pornography and erotic novel and all these different things are realizing that all of a sudden they're not able to engage with physical people anymore in a sexual way. It's actually reprogramming their brain. They're actually doing research on this, and they're discovering that people aren't able to engage. And listen, this isn't just facts that I'm reading off a page. I've sat with these people in my office, and I've heard the devastating stories of how this is ruining marriages. Number 2, second thing you're learning in this school of lust, one body isn't good enough. When you turn your computer on, you have limitless novelty. And all of a sudden, you're learning that one body will never be good enough. Number 3, your spouse's body isn't good enough. You know, the number of people who I've heard say, well, once I get married, everything will be solved. I'm like, you haven't sat with a number of couples who've been married who just realized that this is never gonna solve this issue. If it wasn't dealt with before, it's still gonna be an issue during. Every time. Every time. And then fourthly, your own body isn't good enough. That they're realizing the correlation between body issues and shame issues, mental health, anxiety, depression. Number of people that are just, they're in a marriage where they're realizing one person was engaged in it, the other person's lying in bed wondering how many thousands of images they're being compared to. It's messed both of them up. It's devastating. Even unmarried people, they're having huge issues in these areas. Does it any wonder why Jesus called out that it's not a pastime, but a pathway? It's not a pastime, but a pathway, and it leads to viewing people as a commodity for the taking, not the giving, the opposite of what Jesus was for. Reminds me years ago, some of you were around back then, when the US military would give cigarettes out to their soldiers, right? It's like, this will help, right? This will help you calm down. This is good for your health, make your heart stronger, all that. And then years later, we got this one wrong, right? It's like Jesus, for 2,000 years is like, run, cut, gouge, do whatever you got to do. Get away from this. Christians have been saying this for 2,000 years. And all of a sudden society's like, scientists, sociologists are like, we misread this one. We misjudged this one. It's incredible. There's literally nonprofits that are non-religious, non-governmental that have started just to fight. One of them is called literally Fight the New Drug. Non-religious group that is just realizing in the statistics that this is messing with people's heads and hearts and relationships and our world, and they're terrified of it. No wonder Jesus is like, run like hell or run from hell from this, because this is serious. Take it seriously, because it leads to a godless place. And if God is love, that means engaging in this kind of behavior, this over-desire, leads to a place without love in this life and the next. No wonder Jesus invited us to take drastic measures. That Jesus is inviting us, friends. He's inviting us to shape the future. Imagine a world where your niece, your nephew, your neighborhood kids, your grandkids, your own kids grow up in a world where sex is not a marketable item. It's not a subject of use and abuse, of exploitation, of commodity trading, where the Me Too movement is a thing of the past. Because remember, the Me Too movement is rooted in a kingship. It's a king who says, I want what I want, when I want, how I want, with whom I want, no matter when I want, and nobody's going to tell me differently. Jesus goes against that and says, it's not about taking, friends. It's about giving. And he goes after lust. He says, yep, you know about adultery, but I'm going after lust because it's adultery in a little ball. And it's a pathway, and it leads to a godless place. Jesus clashes with all of these things, and he goes to the root of the issue. He goes to our hearts, and he says, I don't even want this as a seed in your heart. It needs to be cut out. Now maybe you're watching downtown, online, or here in the room, and as I'm talking, God's touching something in you. Something feels exposed, and you're kind of like, something feels cut open, and it feels uncomfortable. Can I just tell you that God, one of the words used to describe him is the healer. He's a healer, but he can't heal something that's not exposed. He can't heal something that you won't allow to be exposed, but he's exposing a cancer in our lives. And Jesus, as our King, is inviting us to live in a new way by going to the root issue. He's like, don't even think about it, friends. Don't go down that pathway. It leads to destruction and death, to a godless place. And Jesus is inviting us, as he did to his original audience 2,000 years ago, to take drastic measures. I opened with my own story of a pathway that I was on that I felt I could never escape. I'll never forget the next year, I was 18, I was driving home from Muskoka with a friend, and by God's grace, I had the courage to ask for help, to take something that was comfortably in the dark and bring it uncomfortably into the light. And that one act was a game changer. In all my years of meeting with people and talking with people who've struggled through this, here's something I've discovered. True healing always involves inviting God and others on the journey with you. If I'm honest, that didn't get solved that day. It was a process that took years of dealing with things, of cutting things out, of gouging things out of my life, of replacing things, of allowing things to be exposed and healed. But Jesus is saying, whatever it takes, get off this path. He's telling us to take it seriously. And he's not telling us to stand and fight. Do you ever notice, like, the scriptures talk a lot about fighting temptation, but when it talks about sexual temptation, it doesn't say fight, it says flee. The Apostle Paul says just flee, just run away, right? And Jesus is like, just cut it off, get it out, like just get it away, right? It's kind of like when I encounter a bear. I've never encountered a bear, so this might not be totally accurate. But I'm gonna tell you what I'm not gonna do. I'm not gonna be like, hey bro, come at me, I've been working out. Not gonna happen. I'm gonna run faster than the person next to me. I think that'll work. Anyways, who knows? Why? Jesus is like, this is huge. And you run from it. You cut everything else in your life out of the way because this is serious and it's a pathway and it leads to destruction. So here's the question, friends. Taking Jesus' words seriously, what do you need to do? What do you need to do? You need to bring it to light. You need to just acknowledge it before God. Some of you, I was doing this. I'm like, God, please don't let me get caught. I'm like, okay, God, we're gonna have a different conversation about this. I'm gonna be honest, I'm gonna confess this. I'm gonna tell some trusted friends to journey with me on this. What do you need to cut out of your life? Is it a friendship? Is it a relationship? Is it a piece of technology? What do you need to cut out? Do you need to make an appointment with a pastor? Do you need to call Brian at Celebrate Recovery? They meet here, and right now they're online, but we're dealing through hurts, hang-ups, and addictive habits. Do you need to call a therapist? Some of you are like, I come from a family, we never call a therapist. Do you need to call a therapist? You You see a marriage counselor? You need to get this out in the open? Do you need to set down a boundary with something or someone? Maybe there's someone that you're involved in a relationship and things are getting serious, and yet you know that they're involved in lust and pornography on a regular basis and it's unchecked, and they've told you, don't worry, it's harmless. Maybe you just need to come to terms that they're in school and it's a pathway and it's going to impact both of your futures. And maybe you just need to drop it. Maybe you need to stop using God as an excuse. God, if you had just given me somebody by now, if I wasn't still single, I wouldn't struggle with this. Can I just say, one, it's not even true. I can't tell you the number of married people I've met who are still struggling with this. Do you just stop using your spouse and their sexual appetite for the reason why you give in to this temptation? Do you need to stop blaming them? They're not the ones logging in late at night. That's you. It's on you. We are always responsible for our actions. If there's healing that needs to be done, are you going to go after it, or are you going to continue to shift blame? Some of you, there are things in your life, let's just be honest, they're not even bad. But you know for you, it puts you down a pathway or a road and you need to stay a mile away from it. Remember a few years ago, my wife and I found a show that we liked watching together, which never happens. After The West Wing, it's been like game over. We're just like, you got your device, I got mine, right? Like none of our shows ever cross paths. But we had this show and we really liked it. It wasn't a bad show. But one of the things I just realized was like, there's a lot of people who are having affairs in the show. And eventually I just told my wife, I'm like, babe, just gotta be honest. When I watch this show, I wanna have an affair. And so I'm just not gonna watch it with you anymore. Honestly, if I told you the show, you'd be like, it's not even a bad show. I'm like, I know, but it was just a theme that I picked up on and it was just taking me down a pathway. And I'm like, I need to stay a million miles away and I'm gouging this, I'm cutting it off, I'm done with it. There are things in your life that aren't even bad, that aren't even sinful, that if you confess, people are like, why are you confessing this? It's just like, you just need to know. This is a dangerous zone for me and it takes me down a path I don't want to go anywhere near. I want to grow in love, I want to grow in sacrifice. I don't want to ever see this as a commodity for the taking. What's the next generation worth, friends? What's our next generation worth? Is it worth an inconvenience of cutting something out of your life? Is it worth an awkward few conversations and confessions? For our nieces, our nephews, our neighborhood kids, our grandkids, to not have to grow up in a world where sex is a marketable item, a subject of use and abuse and exploitation, where the Me Too movement really is a thing of the past. Can we engage with Jesus and take this seriously? For the sake of our world, for the sake of our relationships, for the sake of our health, for the sake of our relationship to our Creator. Can we just pause for a moment? And can we just invite the Spirit of God to bring to mind? And it might mean he might need to open up some things. He might bring to mind some things like, no, I didn't ever want to talk about that. Are we willing to just pause and be still and allow the Spirit of God? That's how the Spirit of God works. He can just bring things to mind. He can just whisper something to you or bring a picture to mind or bring a Bible verse to mind. It's incredible how this happens. So we're just going to pause and take about a minute and just be still and invite the Spirit of God to speak to us over our life. And just this one question, Lord, is there a pathway that we're walking down, maybe that we don't even realize? And is there something that needs to be cut out or gouged out? Speak now, Lord. Thanks, Jesus. Thanks for the way that you speak to us. There's nothing that you reveal that you don't want to heal. Can I invite you to stand as we close? We do this thing called a benediction. It's two ancient words, benedicte, to speak good words or speak blessing. I'd love to just speak a blessing over you. Some of you are maybe here today and you're just feeling overwhelmed. You feel shame. You feel like, but Mark, it's been like 50 times. Like we've had this conversation so much. I'm overwhelmed and God must be so angry at me. Can I just bring you this passage just came to mind. Jesus is on the cross being crucified by people who are very much engaged and involved in what they're doing. And this is his posture. This is God in the flesh, God incarnate, God in a bod. And this is what he says, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. I don't know how he does that. But that is the heart of love. That is the heart of the Father. That is the heart of Jesus, the heart of our God. Wherever you're at today, whatever you're feeling, whatever you're overwhelmed by, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. He wants to heal you. He wants to bring new life. He wants to invite you to a new kingdom. Bless you this week as you go. In Jesus' name, amen.